All right, awesome. So thank you everyone for coming here. So today we're going to have a panel. The topic will be getting more developers to build on blockchain. So we are quite lucky to have some great speakers. So we have Jim from Kaleido, we have Oliver from Wanchain, we have G from Quarkchain, and we have Cooper from Hedera. So, guys, I think the best way to start this panel is for each of one of you to introduce themselves, their technology, their company, and we can get started from here. So, Cooper.
As he said, my name is Cooper. I'm a software developer at Hedera Hashgraph. For anyone who doesn't know, Hedera Hashgraph is an enterprise-grade public distributed ledger. It's the only public ledger that's built on the Hashgraph consensus algorithm. And so the Hashgraph consensus algorithm is a novel protocol that allows us to overcome a lot of the fundamental limitations in blockchain in terms of scalability and security. Another unique aspect of Hedera is the governing council. We were the first public network that had a truly enterprise-ran governing council. We currently have IBM, Deutsche Telekom, DLA Piper, and a lot of other members on our council who are technically the co-owners of the Hedera public network. We support cryptocurrency in what's called HBAR. We have support for all Solidity smart contracts. We also have a file service and a newly announced consensus service that was co-authored by IBM.
Hey everybody, my name is Chi. I'm the founder of Quarkchain. So we are also building like scalable blockchain solutions. Right now targeting for main public blockchain, but also it's pretty flexible to adopt different kind of consensus in different shards. And so our consensus is called personal consensus, and our right now project Quarkchain is basically first realization of the consensus, and it's now running actually pretty smoothly since the launch of the end of April. So we are now more working towards more kind of different type of consensus and also different type of ledger and also transaction model, so that we hope in one day that it is a single, I would say, blockchain of blockchains that can adopt different kind of technology together, both in terms of functionality, the app-friendly consensus, and also maybe privacy preserved tokens that like these days are green, and also be able to using the latest, for example, smart contracts and virtual machines, and also collaborate like Oracle technologies, so that we can easily to also perform, for example, cross-chain transactions capabilities. And so, yeah, very looking forward to grow our developer communities and reach more developers.
Hey everyone, I'm Oliver. I'm head of communications and growth at Wanchain. So there are 3 pillars to Wanchain: smart contracts, privacy, and interoperability, which is our main focus. And we use secure multi-party computation and the proxy system for achieving interoperability. And we've bridged with Bitcoin, Ethereum, and soon EOS. And we're looking to create a universal plug-and-play solution to be able to, well, connect to any blockchain, public or private, in the near future. And we also offer private blockchain solutions for enterprise and the interoperability, so the connection to our public chain.
Jim Zhang, co-founder of Kaleido. So we are the enterprise guys in this crowd. We make blockchain really easy for enterprises. With click button, simple, you can get your chain and you can operate it with your partners in the consortium. At the moment, we're supporting all Ethereum-derived varieties, Quorum, Pantheon, and Geth. But we are multi-protocol and multi-cloud. We support AWS and Azure, but also very quickly on-prem deployment. Personally, I came from a Fabric background. I was a Fabric committer before they kicked me out, because I started this and then focused on Ethereum. Very happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you. So I guess among this crowd, like there is common points. So we have 3 public chains, and we also have Kaleido, which is focusing on enterprise chains. But really the question is how to get more developers building on these chains, how to get more adoption. And I would like to hear your point of view and maybe what you guys have been doing to make sure that you have enough developers building and attracting, because it's a very competitive space. we could say that at some point we get more chains than actual blockchain developers running. So really, what are you guys doing to get more developers using your chain?
Yeah, that's a good question. For a lot of years, I think blockchain was kind of a solution without a problem to solve, and I think a lot of people agree with that sentiment. At Hedera, we're doing a lot of things to make it an easy and friendly platform for engineers. A lot of that starts with having really easy to use based APIs. We support protocol buffers from Google, which is basically an API standardization format. That makes it really easy to compile and use our APIs in any type of language that you want. It's really easy to create wrappers if there's not an SDK in your favorite type of language. On top of that, we already have support for the entire Solidity suite, so anything that you're running on these other chains, you can actually migrate and become a Hedera developer really, really easily. So that's really nice, is that anything you're building on Ethereum or these other networks will run on us out of the box. That's kind of our bottom-up strategy, is just to make it as easy and friendly as possible for the community. But we also have a top-down focus where we work with our enterprises, we work with our council members, we work with some other large consortiums. We'll go to them and we'll run days, week-long programs where we talk to them about the alternatives in the market. We'll talk them through about why you would want to build on one chain versus another, what solutions Hedera is best suited for, why you would want to choose Hedera versus other platforms, and we actually go through full background details versus kind of a high-level market understanding, what solutions lend themselves well to the market, and specifically what solutions lend themselves well to Hedera. And so like recently we actually just ran a hackathon and participated in a hackathon at Magazine Luiza, which is a council member of ours and the largest online retailer in South America, which was really exciting. So we kind of target it in both bottom up and making it easy for anyone from the community to get a part of, and then we also attack it top down, going into enterprises and helping doing high level market education.
So for us, basically we categorize the developer communities into two categories. One category is more like DApp developers. Basically, for example, we support EVM, and then we can easily, for example, for all the applications that are built on top of Ethereum can be easily built on top of us. But at the same time, actually, I think with the sharding and also new technology comes up, this gives a new, for example, programming paradigms to, for example, smart contract. For example, smart EVM is mostly built on a synchronous transaction model, which basically provide a lot of benefits in terms of atomicity and also other features. But at the same time, with the, for example, with multi-shards, with running on the same virtual machines, and people can rely on more on, for example, asynchronous smart contract model, so that I can, for example, call a smart contract from another smart contract with different shards by using a synchronous model, so that for example, in Python, a lot of languages can have this asynchronous, like async await, which can be naturally baked into smart contracts, so that we can do a lot of this smart contract more scalable using the sharding. And so this is one direction we are pursuing. And actually, Ethereum, also Polkadot, there are a lot of good ideas that also trying to address this problem. I think there's a lot of potentials, especially people really want to build a very scalable, I would say, the applications. And so this is one direction we are pursuing. Actually, we are also try to submit some EIPs so that like the Ethereum is able to accept some vendor-specific instructions because for different kind of new applications, Ethereum, in order to support new OP codes in Ethereum, it may conflict with future OP codes in Ethereum. It's like, for example, Intel has Intel-specific instructions, AMD has AMD-specific instructions. So we would like to say, hey, Ethereum should also be able to have some vendor-specific instructions to support extra features more efficiently, for example, asynchronous message call, something like that. And so this is something that we really want to push, and so that all the developers that are using, for example, Ethereum Solidity can be easily to use this new code and to do some more fancy programs rather than Ethereum itself. This is one way. And another category of the community is that the blockchain developer itself, I think we are able to offer one way to attract them to develop on top of us. So one major feature on top of us is that each shard in the network can be using its customized consensus, ledger model, and also even token economies. And so this means that we are able to allow existing blockchain developer to develop one of these blockchain as one of the shard, and we actually allocate the future token release for the developers for every year that we are able to support at a new shard with a completely different consensus, and allocate this a kind of reward for them, and we call it as an initial shard offering. And also invite community members to vote what kind of feature we want in this network. You want privacy or want kind of like fast finality features? And then we encourage community developers to propose these proposals. And then once they're accepted by community, then we allocate the fund for them to support its development and make everybody in the network to be benefit from this kind of the community development. So this is another thing that we want to propose. And we're also glad to see that like Polkadot and Cosmos, they are building something that is close. For example, Polkadot has this IPO model, so that people can stake and then support the new Quarkchain. So we also would like to receive feedbacks. I also learn from the latest development of similar projects, and then make our, for example, this project to be able to benefit from all these latest developments.
So like Quarkchain, we leverage the EVM, so any tools and dApps on Ethereum can easily be migrated over to Wanchain. And with this in mind, about half a year ago, we launched our developer community, and that was aimed at bringing more workshops, virtual seminars, more exposure, getting the developers to build out on Wanchain, and offering bounties in return, which in the end we did, and we had hundreds of applications, and we had some tools built as well. The only problem for us was the loyalty. So since we're leveraging the Ethereum community of developers, we weren't able to get the sense of loyalty to Wanchain, where they would then come back and build more unless it was a bounty. So we were looking at what Loom did with crypto zombies, the gamified approach for providing these tools for developers. And that's something we're looking into now, is where we build out the interoperability courses, having the community do it for us, and having it an ongoing initiative as we, and that's one of the things that we're looking into right now.
We ask the audience, who's done Ethereum programming? Writing a dApp? Who likes to do RLP encoding? RLP encoding to make sure your data can be accepted by the node. So it's one example of an gnarly kind of but essential part of doing programming in this space. It's not very easy to adopt. So what we have done for Kaleido is we want to make it really friendly to the developers that spend years building web applications and are used to doing JSONs and REST. So we hide all the gory details from them and give them a really clean interface of REST and JSON. The other thing that we're doing is, like, there's so many great techniques like HD wallet, token swap, atomic swaps, that a lot of developers have never heard of because it's not in their vocabulary. Like, what is atomic swap? A lot of these are really new concepts. Like you take a lot of learning curve to realize you even need that. So what we've done is we make everything available in our marketplace. You go to this one place and you see a lot of things that are really interesting. And you can start by just reading the documentation we provide, but then you can also try it out. You click a button and it's there, and then you can use APIs to interact with it and touch it and smell it. As a developer myself, I think that's the best way to learn a new technology.
Awesome, all right. So you just mentioned making it easier for developers who are used to programming web apps to really build on blockchain, right? And I think also it's quite interesting because the three blockchains we have here are using Solidity. Now, Solidity has, as you know, some quirks, maybe, you could say, where it's really still immature, it's a new language, and there is dawn of kind of WASM, basically WebAssembly, which will allow developers to build applications using Rust, using Golang, using C++, all these languages. So for instance, Polkadot will be using Wasm, Dfinity will be using Wasm. So how do you see the space evolving with the apparition of Wasm, and is it something you'll be trying to incorporate into your current blockchains?
We'll start at the other end to be more fair.
I don't really have any input except that I'm really excited because we are adopting protocols rather than writing them. But we also work really closely with two of the leading protocol development in the enterprise Ethereum space. We work closely with JP Morgan on Quorum and Pegasus with Pantheon. Both are really interested in adopting EWASM, and especially the Pegasus team who are really active in building Ethereum 2.0. And EWASM is a key component to that. So we're pretty excited to see this getting adopted so we can put it into developers' hands.
Yeah, it's true that Solidity is not the easiest for developers, and well, it's not the easiest, but it's the most widely used on blockchain. And we have considered offering more languages. And going back to your question before about adoption, I think it's important that you have different languages that cater, so you can cater to more than one audience of developers. So to your question about Wasm, it's something we have been talking about, but we haven't talked about the actual integration or deadline for that yet. But it's definitely something we're looking into. At least adding more languages is something on our list for this year.
Yeah, so for us, it's pretty simple question because like for any kind of virtual machine or fixed ledger model, we just say, hey, if this is really good, then we just create a new shard and add it. But from our perspective from WebAssembly, I feel it probably still takes some time to replace Solidity. So at the early beginning, I think Solidity have made a lot of issues, especially in terms of security, calling, re-entering, all these kind of things. But right now, it's making much better these days. And also, there's a lot of best practice to make sure that, make sure when you transfer some money, make sure you actually withdraw it and then do the call and something like that. So I think still when people learn smart contract, we suggest start from mature things first. And then WebAssembly definitely have a lot of, for example, higher performance. We can define different size of the data structures. But I also heard some people complain when they write the C++ and then to do WebAssembly, and it's also still some complicated. So for me, like this is kind of market adoption, and for us, we just say, hey, what it looks like, and then we can just adopt it if the market becomes mature. And then we are looking forward to see how Polkadot and Dfinity, when they support WebAssembly, how they compete with EVM. But I would see there will be a long period of time the market will have the both technology coexist together. High performance one, WebAssembly. Still beginners, Solidity.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point to try to pitch, EWASM as an easier to use alternative. I don't know if that'll ever be the case. It's definitely going to provide, performance, speed benefits, potentially some security benefits as well, portability. So there's a lot of key value propositions there, but I don't know if it by any means is going to make it easier to write bug-free smart contracts. And at the end of the day, that's what a lot of people want. Hedera, supports the EVM. We support Solidity. We'll definitely consider, if this turns out down the road to be a big improvement. That's something that we'll definitely consider. The unique thing about Hedera is the governing council, the IBMs of the world, the people on our governing council would have to say this is something that's stable, this is something we want to use, and then we choose to implement. It's not something that can come from, the community down or community up. And so in that sense, I think the council and Hedera specifically is very, very conservative in the market, and we will wait and make sure that it's mature, that it's stable, that there are best practices around it before adopting it. And with that being said, I would expect Hedera at some point to look into either creating or adopting an easier to use smart contract language that's not necessarily performance focused, something that will help engineers write more clean, less bug-ridden code. Is definitely something Hedera will consider.
All right, awesome. So I guess really the answer from all panelists is really to wait and see how the space evolves, and Solidity is good enough for now. All right, so maybe on to my next question. So I'm sorry to do this kind of cliche question, but we might need to talk about Libra. Now, Libra really in the context of getting more developers using blockchain. So Libra has created their own language, which is called Move. I don't know if you guys had some time to check it out, but it's quite interesting. Do you feel like Libra could be a competitor to attracting more developers to build on blockchain, or maybe even to really foster more growth for the ecosystem, where people will start building on Libra, then they'll see that blockchain development is super interesting, so maybe switch to, Quarkchain, Ethereum, and all the other platforms, right? So, or Hedera.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone saw, but we actually took out a full-page Wall Street Journal ad thanking Facebook for copying our governance model with Libra. So we're very flattered, and we think it's an exciting thing for the space. There's definitely two ways that adoption happens, and one is bottom-up growth and companies building new exciting projects that gain traction. Another one is something like Facebook flipping a switch and having 2 billion users overnight. The question is if developers will be attracted to the ecosystem that Facebook is building. I think we don't really know anything about what that's going to look like yet. The clear answer is that they've done an amazing job stewarding and kind of managing the open source communities that they do maintain to date. I think React is a great example of their successes in the open source world. I think it'll be very interesting to see how that translates and carries over to the decentralized ethos of blockchain and what everyone else is trying to do. But Hedera was very excited and, as we said, flattered about what their announcement was.
So I think Libra is kind of like they're using this move, but I would say since we categorize this blockchain in different dimensions, like we have consensus, ledger model, and transaction model, and polling economies. So I think any good things that developed by Libra, I think can also adopted by other communities. This is something that I really like those big companies enter this market and then contribute to them. And especially if you see the Libra technologies, they are still adopting kind of account base, which is, I think, invented by Ethereum. So I think this kind of adoption, in some sense, means that these big companies are actually acknowledging those technologies that are developed by blockchains. And I also appreciate that, like in the move, it brings a lot of security features. For example, in Ethereum, every address can be either user or smart contract, and people want to transfer money to either this address. It may trigger a smart contract to create further issues. I think in Move, it makes a lot of security features to prevent this happens, to know whether it's doing a smart contract calls or just transfer balance to users. So I think all this best practice can greatly contribute to the, for example, the blockchain community. And I think we are very happy to see make these things happening. And for us, like always something really good, then we can also again try to find some way to create a shard to incorporate it. So I think this is also a big plus to us.
So there are two parts. You can be a trend setter or a trend follower. And what Facebook did was they set a trend, and they're going to cause a disruption that's not only in payments, but you're going to see in messaging, you're going to see in gaming, in e-commerce, in banking. And since it's one of the biggest players, as Cooper said, over 2 billion users, there are going to be others that are going to be following suit now. And we're all waiting for standards, especially the regulatory framework standards. And I think this is an important discussion. Even if Libra doesn't end up happening for whatever reasons, I think the discussions that are happening now in Congress and that we're having just across the world is very important, because now we can start shaping these new regulatory frameworks. And from that point on, we can start learning about what they're doing and adopting them to our own blockchains, and perhaps even creating the bridges to Libra if we need to as well. So I do think it's an important step. It's in the right direction as well for whatever happens, and we're just going to continue seeing more players come out with big news after this now. I think people are just waiting for someone to set this new trend or this new announcement, and we're going to start seeing more.
So I'm of the view that Libra is more of a social engineering, finance play rather than technology. Who's read the technical white paper, like page to page? Do you guys agree that there's like no groundbreaking innovation in that design? To me, it's a very practical improvement to a tried and true model, which is very similar to Ethereum. I read through the paper like in 30 minutes because I was like reading an Ethereum paper. I can skip lots of it and then just pick out the pieces where they improve. Those are really good improvements, but the fundamental model is the same. So technology-wise, it's not that interesting, but it's a good thing to have because it validates a lot of the existing technologies. I think whether this is going to be adopted by the open source community, I don't think that really matters because Libra itself is the thing that's important, right? It's got such a huge user base. It's going to work with all the governments that's involved. That's a hard piece. They're already seeing a lot of resistance within home base already. So let's see how they're going to push through with other governments. But I think with the size, if it were not for the size of Facebook and for the how big the company is, Libra would be just another thing. It's not going to be as interesting to the world.
All right, awesome. Yeah, I had to do the Libra question. So I guess next on, since that's Oracle HackerNode, right? Maybe we should talk a bit about oracles and really in the context of developers. As you surely know, like currently most of the use cases on Ethereum and on smart contract development platforms are really about tokenization. So I'm tokenizing something, I'm exchanging it with other people, but you don't really have any trigger that's based on real-world events or actions. So really, like what oracles will allow is to have kind of a new generation of smart contracts which are actually connected to the real world. And I wanted to get maybe your thoughts on what use cases will come out of it, and how do you think having robust oracles will help to attract more developers to build compelling use cases on blockchains?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. I don't know what's going on over here. But it's a great question. I think that the smart contract oracles are actually going to be, a huge requirement for any type of enterprise application that's built on smart contracts. You don't hear an enterprise like IBM and these other companies coming in and talking about, things that are purely on ledger that don't really require off-ledger data. Most of these businesses aren't built purely decentralized. They're, retrofitting centralized business models to a decentralized world. And what that means is that they actually have to take things from that centralized and, the physical world and bring that on ledger and be able to represent that, be able to exchange that on chain or on Hashgraph, depending on what you're using. And so I think it's really clear that, having stable, standardized Oracle contracts are a requirement for enterprises to continue adopting the space. Things that people are pursuing on Hashgraph already that are, smart contract based and required oracles or anything from tokenized assets. Basically, a lot of real estate projects are looking into us. One of our council members, Nomura Holdings, has, I want to say, about $2 trillion worth of assets. It's the largest financial institution in Japan. And they're looking at tokenization of asset services on top of Hedera as well. Some of the use cases that DLA Piper has expressed to us that they're building for their clients are related to tokenized assets. We see a few insurance firms being interested. We see a few pharmaceutical firms being interested. We see a lot of supply chain companies, especially kind of the more modern ones trying to digitize supply chain. And so all of these industries will require some type of, external data if they're wishing to, leverage smart contracts. So standards, being able to have kind of a guaranteed tried and true solution is a big deal. Having community support and having a lot of pre-existing kind of plug-and-play contracts goes a long way.
So I think the Ethereum smart contract success, actually, I feel is mainly because it has several major applications. For example, ERC eternity, and define like basically everybody can define its customized token colonies, and also like some like the DAO, so that people can using the smart contract to do some autonomous decisions. For us, actually, we are exploring another applications that highly tied to our consensus, which we call our proof of stake work. Basically, the core idea is that if a miner has some proportion of the stake in the network, then it can enjoy the corresponding hash power, some benefits, like sometimes some like hash power improvement. And in addition, the more the hash power, especially in terms of percentage of network, and the more the stake it requires. So basically, the more response, the more benefit you get from the network, then the more response the miner must take. And actually, we found this very interesting because a lot of miners, right now, they do not want to stake. Then how could they get benefit from it? So it asks communities to stake together. So there are a lot of miners come to our community, say, hey, we want to stake, and blah, blah, blah. But this creates kind of staking market with the miner market. Instead of like people work for stake, fight each other, either or, but they choose together. But how to build up this contract relationship with them? And then smart contract actually is become a very crucial part that people, the staker and miners, they put a contract into the smart contract and tell, hey, if there's a block being mined, then how to distribute it. It's also possible that multiple stakers can put it together and create a stake pool, so that once there's a more, for example, money rewards, they can distribute to the multiple stakers. So we are exploring kind of new applications that utilize the smart contract and see how this marketplace works for both stakers and miners, and how the system will eventually evolve. So I think this is actually we just started for 2 weeks, but can't believe this hash power, just increased significantly, and also there's significant increase of stakers into the network. And so we are looking forward to see in the following months to see how this evolves and how this marketplace will go.
That's a great question. So smart contracts are self-executing code on the blockchain, and oracles provide reliable information to these smart contracts. In the case of Chainlink, you're providing true connectivity. So when you look at, for example, a mobile phone, you need a mobile phone without internet or roaming is pretty useless. You can use it, but you're disconnected from the outside world. In the case of Chainlink or oracles, you are connected to the outside world, where you can then prove or verify that the information you're getting is correct. And we're seeing a lot of instances of oracles being used, but in the case of more complex situations, for example, a car crash where you almost need human interaction, it's going to take a bit more time. But in the case of almost anything else that we're currently seeing, you need like user accounts, or in the case of random generation, gambling dApps, and so forth, the oracles are needed, and you need decentralized oracles and ease of use, and I think Chainlink is achieving that ahead of anyone else as well.
I guess I'll just mention briefly, I feel like a lot of enterprises are still in early phase of adoption, but very quickly we're going to see them realizing that, okay, I've taken baby steps, now I feel comfortable with Solidity or chain code, whatever. Now let's do some real stuff, right? When they're ready to do that, they're going to realize just running things in isolation is not going to be enough. So I think we're going to see mass adoption of various technologies of oracles very soon. I still remember in early days of Fabric, I don't know if you know, Fabric supports full language chain code. they cheat by just making REST calls from their chain code. That just says you need oracles to do real business, and you need a system, robust system like Chainlink to do it the right way.
So everyone is excited about Chainlink, which is good to hear. All right, so I guess one last question from me would really be, what kind of industry do you feel will, so just after the Oracle question, so what kind of industry will really start picking up blockchain and will really be the first one to adopt blockchain? So if you look at, for instance, Tron, EOS, they have a lot of gambling dApps which are being run there, right? If you look at Ethereum, there's DeFi, which is making a lot of noise and which is getting adoption already with a few $100 million already being used in CDPs on Maker, for instance, or with synthetics. So really, what use case are you really excited about, and which one do you think will really pick up and start driving the adoption forward?
Yeah, the one that I think is going to kind of pioneer enterprise adoption in this space, I don't think anyone knows, but the one that I would guess is probably supply chain. And actually, I think this is kind of quoted from Ari Paul, is that it's going to be supply chain within a super specific and a niche category with assets that are hard to track at the moment. It's not going to be broad and wide. It's going to be niche things that have supply chain problems to date. With that being said, I think it could actually be anything. I don't think we know what's going to kind of push the enterprise bubble and cause that to pop. I think you could see something like a large organization or even a large country allowing security tokens. And I think the tokenization of assets in terms of traditional financial holdings, things like real estate specifically, if you get a regulatory approval to do tokenized real estate, that's going to be very, very validating for a lot of markets. When we're talking to companies, you might hold $2 to $15 billion of real estate, and you might hold that in 10 to 20 buildings. It's very, very hard to liquidate and move all of those assets at once and to find liquidity. So for large organizations to be able to kind of have, this piece by piece, we can sell 1 millionth or however small of a multi-billion-dollar building or a multi-billion-dollar real estate organization is a very compelling use case. I think a lot of enterprise adoption is still really hinging on regulatory approval and clearance. So as soon as that kind of gets green stamped in any way, I think we'll see a lot of people piling in. So maybe the use case that I'm most excited about is probably decentralized identity and or credential management. So as an individual user, I love the notion of self-sovereign identity and decentralized identity, being able to control what you do online in a transparent way. And things like credential management is going to be huge in like the healthcare industry. We have an app that's building on us that's called Intiva Health. It takes about 30 days to 3 months right now to get your medical credentials verified. So that's your entire job history, what you've done, where you've been educated, your whole job history has to be verified every time you want to work at a new hospital, work at a different place. And so this type of being able to record that all on Ledger could provide almost instantaneous verification for things that currently take up to 3 months. So decentralized identity and being able to attest to what you've done historically as an individual person excites me as an end user.
So I think for us, we are actually looking for one direction. Is probably the large applications of blockchain together with stablecoin. Especially a lot of business right now is still working with stablecoin. So people, for example, when doing payments or doing a lot of local transactions, people use stablecoin. And together with smart contract, imagine in a situation, for example, when I buy a car, and then suppose I just pay using my, for example, stablecoin on the blockchain, and with smart contract, you can automatically distribute all this money to the suppliers, and the suppliers can distribute this money through their smart contract to further suppliers. So imagine like this currency like blood, and this is circulation. The faster the blood circulates, and the faster the economy grows. And with smart contract, we can quickly, for example, for every payment I made a car, then the vendor of the screws immediately get the money because of smart contract. And so that it can quickly order new materials and perform this kind of business immediately. Instead of like in a bank, people need to settle a lot of things while it's banking and while a lot of these manual transactions, all kinds of things. So I think this kind of automation will dramatically make this business much faster and break existing financial systems. And second is that we are exploring some business require a large amount of data. People call big data, especially big value data, are called blockchain. Still, we see right now Ethereum, rather we say, hey, it's growing much larger. For example, its archive node has roughly 2 terabytes of data. And if you see Libra, its suggested node is, I think it's roughly running with 50 terabytes of disk. But actually, to our view, this is far too small compared to a lot of big data. Imagine, like, for example, what the business I just described, for every manufacturing or supply, this supply chain that we want to distribute all this, there may be a lot of components in the network, a lot of data in the network, and we need kind of like a large, either can be enterprise solutions or public blockchain to storage all this data, and it can be hundreds of terabytes or maybe petabytes of data, by using kind of sharding technology so that we can split all this data in multiple machines and storage. Even a small machine maybe just have terrible data, but terrible capacity, by putting them together, they can still store this petabyte of data. And we are actually seeking one or two of these examples so that blockchain not just like, for example, just doing some simple transfer, but a lot of this other business that require this large data and fast financial circulations.
And to what Cooper was saying, the tokenization of the world's digital assets is underway, and I think we're going to start seeing mention about real estate. Since it's a highly liquid market and there's paperwork, there's intermediaries, many parties involved in the transaction, that's going to be one of the top use cases in the near future. And there was a project even, I think it was about half a year ago, that tried to tokenize the Chrysler building it was around $1 billion. It didn't succeed, but it's interesting to see these companies and projects come ahead and will try to change the world. Also with decentralized identity, I think that's going to play a very important role, especially when you control your data and you can choose who to share the data to. So you're almost creating a marketplace for your identity. So you can go to your doctor and you can choose what information you want to share, and then you're talking to insurance and so forth. So I think these are going to be very important. But I think before that, we're going to go for the lower barriers to entry, such as gaming, as we've seen. That's why gambling on Tron and EOS becomes so popular. And I think the next thing in regards to enterprise is going to be reward programs. So a lot of these companies that are trying to compete with the bigger ones, the smaller companies, smaller airlines trying to compete with the bigger ones, they need to change their ways. And one way to do that is to offer reward programs, better reward programs. And it costs 5 times as much to acquire a new user as to retaining. So we're going to see a lot more. These companies are going to be issuing, they're going to be targeting the younger generations, and they're going to be offering all sorts of rewards. And we're going to see interoperable wallets where you can then swap these loyalty points for one another. So you can have airline points that are going to be swapped with hotel points. And I think we're going to see that before a lot of the other things like real estate tokenization and with some of the other illiquid markets, but it all comes in due course. I think we're about 3 to 5 years away from the true adoption.
So, great answer so far from the public chain point of view, creating new business models and making things disrupt existing models. From enterprise point of view, things are a little different. What we see enterprise do is taking baby steps to improve on things that are completely broken, paper-based stuff, so that they can leapfrog, right? Just skipping that, digitizing, making everything electronic, go from paper-based directly to blockchain. In fact, our very first production consumer on Kaleido is just that. So it's a consortium based in Europe that's doing global trade finance. If you are in the industry, you know this is paper-based business. You literally send documents from one side of the pond to the other, and then people sign and bring it back, and you show the signature and you release the money. That's how things are done. It's incredibly efficient and very costly. At the end of the trade, you accumulate like 50,000 pages of stuff. So you have a lot of incentive to make things work better, but you don't have the resistance of the existing IT as well. Because in a lot of other industries, maybe banking as an example, things can be improved with blockchain, but things work today. People have spent 10 years, right, making things work, sending electronic documents from one bank to the other. It's very costly, but it still works, right? So you have that resistance when you want to, bring things offline and put it into blockchain. With global trade finance, you don't have that problem. You just leapfrog and then go to the new world. So we tend to see that being the first successful deployment to production. So I guess enterprise is still trying to improve existing business rather than creating new business. But there may be a point in the future, hopefully not too far away, to where we can see everybody's creating new business models.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, it's great to see the difference of point of views between enterprise chains and public blockchain. So, all right, perfect. So, I feel like it's kind of time to have lunch, sure? Now, maybe before we end, we could get some questions from the audience, if anyone has any question. Else we can eat earlier, it's fine with me, whichever. All right, awesome. Anything you guys want to add, or?
Thanks, everyone. Yeah, I think we're all excited about Chainlink.
All right, awesome. All excited about Chainlink. That's perfect. Perfect notes. All right, so thank you very much, and we'll be continuing this afternoon. All right.